So I've also been having a lot of thoughts lately because of everything that's going on with the various diverse communities, including the Asian community, about why we feel annoyance or jealousy of groups that we don't, or even groups that we do identify with. I guess it's like specific jealousy of individuals. And that is something that I have definitely struggled with my entire life. I think that when you blow that type of emotion up and you apply it towards a specific group, because that group, you only see one representation of them in media, or you only know people who are that way within the group, that's what leads to profiling and unfair perceptions being laid upon an entire category. And for me, I've always struggled with jealousy and insecurity my whole life. And so from that perspective, I think it's a very, unfortunately, human emotion to resent people for things that you don't have, or that things you perceive they received through unfair means or through luck, or through whatever factor that you don't really have an understanding of in terms of how they got there. And I feel that way, for instance, about a lot of people who look really well off on social media, people who live in mansions, people who just become super famous when they're younger and then are kind of able to live with that excess sort of lifestyle for their entire lives. I'm getting on a sidetrack, but the point is, I think that's super normal to feel that, and I have often had to catch myself whenever I do feel those emotions and try not to apply them to others and to not let them get to me, because otherwise I'm always gonna feel really insecure about my life and about what I've achieved. I mean, I think a lot of us feel that way because of what we see online, what we see even in our friend group, right? You see all these people posting whatever and they seem to have it all. I candidly am affected by that on a day-to-day basis. I don't really know the solution, I think, is the point of this. I think it's just you can't assume what you see of one person is representative of the entire group, because that's just not really how life works, and that's not how people work, right? Just because I look this way, I know many Asians who are not at all like me. I think for me, the bigger struggle is actually not feeling jealousy at work. I think that I get that quite a bit. I can feel like something's unfair. I can feel like, oh, this person is only so successful and in that super high profile role because they landed it when the company was really young and they've been able to grow their career up, and it's gonna be so much harder now. And to an extent, I think that's true. There are people that just have really good luck on timing and who end up in a place where they're going to make a lot of money and do really well, even if they are just of average skill, quote unquote, versus somebody else who may have landed in a worser industry. And I think that's also why, for me, as I've gotten older, I have become much more open to the idea, or really actually favorable to the idea of social protections and creating a society where people who are not lucky and who are less fortunate are still able to have a really good quality of life. Because I think that's the fundamental issue that we're seeing rear its head in the waves of discrimination and waves of backlash. And when you don't have any societal protections, if you do fall behind, if you lose your job, if your entire sector gets wiped out, it creates almost this us versus them mentality for yourself against anybody who has it better. And also when you have a extremely capitalistic society, which the US is, and that's just the truth, right? Where you have executives at companies, corporate leaders, CEOs, board members making hundreds of millions of dollars for 1 year of work, aka a lifetime's worth of money for 1 year, and still clamoring for more and saying they deserve it. And meanwhile, lower level employees, janitors, essential workers are getting paid minimum wage, $15 an hour. You could work your whole life at that rate, and it's gonna be really tough to save up for college and to save up for rental expenses and stuff, especially as richer folks or folks who are better off buy property and end up investing their money and watching it grow, and most people maybe don't have that luxury. I think that is one fundamental piece of the problem, especially with the fact that health insurance is tied to our employment, with the fact that our entire sense of belonging, our entire identity for a lot of people is tied to their work and what they do. You see people have it easy, you just naturally become really disgruntled, or perceived as easy, so to speak. As I don't necessarily think anyone has it easy I think we could do a little bit of an assessment of how much the income inequality is becoming in this country and what the disparity is between pay at the lowest and the top levels for pretty much all US companies. Because you could look at any companies, and this is all public, by the way. You can go online and look up board compensation, CEO, CFO compensation in public filings for these large companies, and you can see that universally across America, there's a massive ratio difference, and that is leading to a lot of this dissatisfaction, I think, and like this feeling of unfairness, because it is very unfair. It is, unfortunately, by nature, it is very unfair, and that's why we need some level of basic protection when people are on the wrong side of that and are struggling. I think that the key is to take it out on lawmakers and on government and on what the government is failing to do and failing to provide in terms of making changes at a speed that's fast enough to reflect the growing disparities in the country. I think that the root of a lot of this starts with unequal education and unequal access to education. I don't mean higher education. I think education starts at the very lowest levels. Education is much more than just being about what you learn and what you memorize and, understanding the periodic table. I think education is about teaching these sort of moral values that only can be derived through understanding history, through being able to access books by knowing how to read. Like the very, very basic tenets of education, I think, are what are important. So that's why I think we need to invest in better education at the ground level, not at the higher ed level, which is, we all know, very overpriced at this point, extremely sort of politicized in terms of like who can get in, as we saw with the college admissions scandal even. What we really need is basically just some sort of, if you grow up in a certain school district, you shouldn't be at a disadvantage to someone who grows up in a different school district. That's the fundamental, my belief of what education needs to do. And right now, that's just not the system we have, with the system of local property taxes supporting our education systems from the K-12 level. This is just some of my thoughts. You may disagree, you may strongly agree, but I think that this is the root of what is causing a lot of the discontent in our country more broadly and just across different groups. And I hope that this increased your perspective on some of these issues, and please feel free to let me know also if you have other thoughts or reactions. Thank you for listening to this.